So let's take a deep breath together as we move into this part of our service. Here we are at Thanksgiving time, and our theme for the month, as you know, is a litany of thanksgiving. And today the topic is the harvest of the heart, the harvest of the heart. You know, a harvest is a gathering in of fruits that have ripened, of crops that have ripened. And I like the part about harvest that is a gathering in, because that's where we are right now in this season of gathering in as we move toward winter, as we move toward going back into being in our homes, kind of. It isn't lockdown, but certainly being more separate from each other than we have been for the last few months, last couple of months anyway. And this is a time of gathering in. This is a time of gathering in. This is a time of the harvest. This is a time of really going inward. And we've been doing a lot of that because we have been apart from each other for so long. But this is a different time when we start into winter, when we start into Thanksgiving time. And this is what I'd like us to think about today, the harvest of the heart. You know, gathering those fruits of an open heart is what I'd like to talk about today. I've been thinking a lot about how Thanksgiving is so different for us coming up this year, how the holidays are going to be so different for us coming up this year, how life is so different for us coming up this year. And how are we dealing with all that? I think that there are some people who are reeling from it. There are some people who are still reeling from the election. There are some people who are still reeling from the separation and the pandemic. There are so many things that have just left us with heavy hearts. There's so many things that we get concerned about. There's so many things that we think about. There's so many things that are so different in our lives. And so I'd like us to just take a deep breath and just really be open. Take a deep breath and just really be available. Take a deep breath and just really be anchored and centered and looking at what's really going on with us. What's really keeping us from, well, let me just say this. Harvesting has to do also with planting and harvesting and sowing and reaping. And so we're going to always reap what we sow. We're going to always harvest what we plant. So, and this isn't something that just happens one time of year. It happens all the time. It happens every day. Every day we're planting. Every day we're harvesting. Every day we're sowing. Every day we're reaping. And if we want to know exactly what we have sown, look at what we are reaping today. That's where we are. Whatever we are reaping today is what we have sown in the past. And so making the decision to start from this point to sow something different so that our tomorrows will be different. Our tomorrows will look the way we want them to look. Our tomorrows will have the experience we'd like to have. And so the starting place is always in the heart. And as I look at the things that are going on, as I've been talking about all month, as we've been talking about really for several months, all the unrest, all the divisiveness, all the otherness that we find that we get caught up in. You know, I've been just really wondering and considering, what is it that we all need? What is it that we all need? And this morning it came through so strongly. What we all need is forgiveness. What the world needs is forgiveness. What we all need to practice over and over and over again is forgiveness in every area of our lives. That is the big thing that we forget about. And that's the thing that is so important for us to keep open the doors of our hearts. As the reading said, keep open the door of our heart. That's one of my favorite readings, because when we close the doors of our hearts, then we close out each other. We close out, first of all, we close out God. We close out that only power, that only presence, that only life that is our very life, with our hearts closed. And so when we do that, we're closing out each other also. And we do that with our unforgiveness, with our grudges, with our resentment, with our anger, with our blame, with our judgment, with all the stuff, and Howard Thurman calls that thicket, the thicket that our hearts get caught up in over and over and over again. And so I just urge us all to really open our hearts, open our minds, open our entire being to the possibility of forgiveness. Forgiveness. forgiveness, and keeping in mind, I talk about forgiveness off and on a lot, at keeping in mind that only you can make an act unforgivable. There are some things that we see that people do that we think we'll never forgive them for, and that we can't forgive them for it. That makes that act unforgivable, because we have made it unforgivable by declaring it to be unforgivable within ourselves. And so what I'm asking us to do today is to really consider releasing and letting go, really consider releasing and letting go of the judgment that we have, releasing and letting go of the sense of separation that we have from each other by practicing forgiveness, practicing releasing and letting go. Yes, there are things that happen. Yes, there are things that happen that are reprehensible. Yes, there are things that happen that are uncalled for. Yes, there are things that happen that are so disturbing. Yes, there are things that happen that make no sense at all. And just when we think that the world can't get crazier, it does. Just when we think things can't get crazier, they do. And so the way that we get caught up in all that closes our hearts. The way we get caught up in all that makes us move into, as I talk about a lot, into our them and us camps. The way that things happen before we know it. Before we know it, we go unconscious and we start to make judgments about each other, criticism about each other, assumptions about each other, and blaming each other. And all of that stuff affects each one of us, because forgiveness is for each one of us. Forgiveness is to keep my heart open. Forgiveness is to keep your heart open. Forgiveness is to keep open the door to my heart so that I can experience my oneness with the all that is. Because I'm made in the image and likeness and out of pure spirit, and there's that presence from which I can never be separate, except to the degree that I practice separation. Except to the degree that I practice separation, and I practice separation when I am closing my heart, when I am separating, when I'm acting like I don't know who I am, when I'm separating myself from others, when I'm separating myself from myself by holding something against myself. And so it is just so important for us to just take a deep breath, take a step back, and just really make a decision that, you know what, the biggest thing we need to do right now is forgiveness, is practice forgiveness. Practice forgiveness. Ernest Holmes says we must be in a continual state of forgiveness, else we'll be in a continual state of unforgiveness. We must be in a continual state of forgiveness, else we'll be in a continual state of unforgiveness. There's no two ways about it. You're either in a state of forgiveness, and you're in that state constantly, continuously, continually, or you're in a state of unforgiveness. There's no middle ground there. It's forgiveness or unforgiveness. And so I'm inviting you to really consider being in that constant state, that continual state of forgiveness, that continual state of letting go, that continual state of releasing blame and releasing judgment and releasing shame and releasing guilt and releasing all that stuff that we hold on to. All that stuff that we hold on to. And as we're holding on to it, we internalize it, and then it becomes a part of our energy field. And that energy has to go somewhere. And then we end up with dis-ease. We end up experiencing dis-ease in every area of our lives, in addition to in our body temples. And so it's important for us to keep in mind that forgiveness is for each one of us, and forgiveness is one of the best spiritual practices that we can do. When we do our prayer, we do our meditation, we do our forgiveness practice. That should be a daily practice, a daily practice. A daily practice is of forgiveness, a continuous practice. Martin Luther King says forgiveness is a continual act. It's not an occasional act. It's a continual thing throughout our lives. And so it's important for us to really, really, really set our intention to start a forgiveness practice. If you have one, wonderful, wonderful, bump it up some. If you don't have one, wonderful, start right now. You can start right now. You can start right now. And so I'm inviting you to really start by a couple of things I want to say about it. Start by doing an assessment to see where you need to do forgiveness work. Where do you need to do forgiveness work? Who do you need to forgive? What do you need to forgive? What is it that just makes you angry over and over and over again? Who is it that makes you angry over and over and over again? Who is it that you can't stop talking about? Who is it that you can't stop talking about and blaming and judging? Or what is it that you can't stop talking about and blaming and judging? If there's anything that's got your attention in that way, that's a forgiveness issue. That's a forgiveness issue. That means that there is something that you need to let go. There's something that you need to release, because if you're blaming and you're judging, your heart is closed. If you're blaming and judging, your heart is closed. And if your heart, a closed heart is a closed heart. If your heart is closed in one area against one person, your heart is closed. It's closed. A closed heart is a closed heart. If there's a block, there's a block. And so keeping in mind that when we are in that place of judgment, we're in that place of blaming, when we're in that place of finger pointing, when we're in that place of criticizing, we're in that place of a closed heart. We're in that place of a closed heart, and that's not where we want to be. And, as the reading says, and I was talking about so reaping what we sow. As the reading said, love begets love, hate begets hate, indifference begets indifference. What you reap, so shall you sow. What you sow, so shall you reap. What you sow, so shall you reap. And so keeping that in mind, it is so important for us to really monitor as we go along what we're thinking, what we're saying, how we're acting, how we're feeling about a person, how we're feeling about a situation, how we're feeling about circumstances, how we're feeling about ourselves. All of that is so important, because this gives us the nudge that there's some forgiveness that needs to be done. There's some forgiveness that needs to happen so that we can open our hearts. Ernest Holmes says we cannot expect to be forgiven unless we forgive. We cannot expect to be forgiven unless we forgive. We got to be willing to forgive. We got to be willing to forgive. And so he also says, refuse to see the negative side of anyone. Holmes also says, refuse to see the negative side of anyone. And now that's a tough one. As I've said this before, that's a tough one. However, keeping in mind that we're also taught that what we're looking for, we're looking with, what we're looking at, we're looking with. So if we're seeing the negative side of someone else, what we're looking at, we're looking with. How is that reflecting me? We are each and all a reflection of each other. We're always reflecting each other. And I like to say that when somebody's reflecting me, it's not that I'm not that bad. It's that they are worse, and they're that bad so that I can see it, rather than just owning it. If I'm seeing it, that's what I'm looking with. And that's for all of us. What we're looking at, what we're looking with, what we're looking for, we're looking with, because otherwise we couldn't see it. So refusing to see the negative side of anyone is our charge. Refusing to see the negative side of anyone. And when we do, forgive ourselves for that. And whatever it is that we are seeing in them, forgiving them for whatever that is. Forgiving them and releasing them and letting them go. Now, forgiveness, of course, does not mean that we are condoning wrongful behavior. It doesn't mean that we don't hold people accountable. We can forgive someone and still prosecute them. I used to be a prosecutor. We can forgive someone and still prosecute them. But we're doing it from a place of an open heart. We're doing it from a place of non-judgment. We're doing it from a place of openness, rather than from a place of a closed heart and from a place of being punitive, and punitive in the sense of getting revenge or blaming, or continuing to blame, or continuing to punish, wanting to punish. When we forgive someone and still hold them accountable, we know that the law of cause and effect is always working. So whatever the consequences of their action will be, whatever the effect is, whatever the natural consequence of their action will be, will happen. We don't have to worry about revenge. We don't have to worry about how it's going to turn out. We don't have to worry about any of that. Our work is to open our hearts, to release anything that we're holding, to still hold people accountable if we need to, hold ourselves accountable when we need to, and then let the law take over. Let the law take over. Let the law of cause and effect operate, because it is always operational. It is always operational. So I invite you to do an assessment and determine where is it that you need to do forgiveness? Where is it that, what is it that you need to release? And it could even be the pandemic. Everybody has gotten pandemic weary. We're dealing with pandemic fatigue. And the devastation that has occurred because of this virus is really, it's really something. And to the degree that we are angry about that, to the degree that we are holding our hearts closed against the way that's happening, we need to do forgiveness there. And forgiveness work doesn't have to make sense. That's the thing that we have to keep in mind. It doesn't have to be logical. Like, it makes no sense for me to have to forgive a pandemic. Well, if you're holding something against it, it does make sense, because the forgiveness is for you. The forgiveness is for you. The forgiveness is for you. The forgiveness is for me. And so to the degree that we're holding our hearts closed against anything or anyone or any situation or any circumstance, to the degree that our hearts are closed, take a deep breath and just let it go. Be willing to let it go. Be willing to let it go. And so I invite you to really do that assessment and determine where you need to do forgiveness. And then when you find those things that are really, really hard to let go, start with the little things. Start with little infractions. Start with minor infractions. Because the more you can do the little ones, the more you can do the little things, the more you can practice forgiveness just about somebody cutting you off on the freeway, the more you can do forgiveness about somebody who really upsets you by something they say on TV. But the more we can do those kinds of things, the more we develop our forgiveness muscle, the more we strengthen that forgiveness muscle. And it's so important for us to strengthen that muscle. It's like exercise. We got to do it over and over and over again. And sometimes we'll be more successful at it than others. Sometimes we will be, we can just forgive on the spot. We can forgive on the spot. We can forgive on the spot. Other times we hold on to stuff that we don't even know we're holding. Sometimes things are so outrageous that we don't even know that our hearts have closed and that we've moved into that place of judgment. When we do that, step back and see what little thing is irritating you. What little thing is getting on your nerves? What little thing is it that you're willing to let go of and you can let go of easily? You can just take a breath and say, oh, I'm holding on to that. Let me just let that go. Let me just let that go. I think that is the way that we can really get into that habit. We can get into that, what I like to call that atmosphere of forgiveness. We can get into that place where we can just let things go on the spot. There's no reason to hold on to it. Because when we don't get into the habit of continually forgiving, then with all the things that are going on in the world that keeps everybody on edge, that keeps us uptight, little things then start to blow up into big things. Little things start to blow up into big things that they don't have to do. When we learn how to just let those things go, when we learn how to just take a breath and take that energetic step back, when we can learn how to do that, then we can move into that place where we can live in an atmosphere of forgiveness. We can live in that atmosphere of forgiveness. We can let go. We can start to then harvest, experience the harvest of the heart. We begin to experience the fruits of our labor. We begin to experience and to reap what we have sown. When we have sown forgiveness, we get a chance to reap freedom. When we have sown forgiveness, we get a chance to reap love. When we have sown forgiveness, we get a chance to reap joy. When we have sown forgiveness, we get a chance to reap the allness and the fullness, the benefits of the allness and fullness of God, because we don't have that closed heart, because we don't have that block that's keeping us from experiencing the allness and the fullness of the Creator, of that which created us. We don't have the block to our own creativity. We don't have the block to us living the life that we were intended to live, because our hearts are open and we're living free. When we are willing to just let go, when we are willing to just let go and to practice forgiveness. This is what the world needs now. What the world needs now is forgiveness. What the world needs now is letting go. What the world needs now is us opening our hearts. Because when it's, as the reading says, when my heart is open, there's nothing you can do to stop me from loving you. I love that concept. I love that concept. That if I'm loving you, there's nothing you can do to stop me from loving you. There's nothing I can do to stop me from loving you, you from loving me. And so I think that if we can keep that in mind, that when it doesn't, when our hearts are open, it doesn't matter how many doors are closed against us. When the doors of our own hearts are open, it doesn't matter how many hearts are closed against us. It doesn't matter, because we don't keep our hearts open depending on how many hearts are open to us. We keep our hearts open so that the fullness of pure spirit can flow through us, so that all of life can flow through us. We keep our hearts open so that we can experience the love, the peace, the harmony, the joy, the balance, the order of pure spirit. We keep our hearts open. We keep our hearts open so that we can experience being all that we were created to be. We keep our hearts open, and we do that through the power of forgiveness. One of the most powerful, 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 powerful tools we have. One of the most powerful spiritual qualities we have is forgiveness. And so I'm inviting you to really, as we move through this time, as we move through the holiday season, as we move through not being able to be with family at Thanksgiving time, which really could be upsetting for many of us, not being able to travel the way we want, not being able to do things we've been doing all along. As we move through this time, be able to do so with an open heart so that we can really, really, really reap the fruits of an open heart. We can really, really reap the fruits of an open heart as we move through this time, through this season of Thanksgiving, with true Thanksgiving, and giving true Thanksgiving for an open heart, giving true Thanksgiving for love, giving true Thanksgiving for those things that are important, giving true Thanksgiving for our lives, for our loved ones, for all of us, for life itself, giving true Thanksgiving for the blessings that abound in our lives. Even though there are all kinds of issues, all kinds of problems, there are many, many blessings. And we give true Thanksgiving for that. And we can give true Thanksgiving when we're giving it with an open heart, with an open heart, with a heart that is free of fear, free of judgment, free of blame, free of all that stuff. And so I'm inviting you today to move into a place of compassion. Compassion. Compassion for yourself. If you find that you're having difficulty forgiving, have compassion for yourself. Forgive yourself for that. And continue to work on it. Continue to work on it. Have compassion and continue to work on it. Have compassion and continue to work on your forgiveness. Have compassion for others when you can't always see their behavior changing. Having compassion and recognizing that we all share a common humanity. We all share a common humanity. And how difficult it must be when someone acts so badly, when someone acts so harmfully to others, how difficult that life must be, because that is a life that is feeling separate from God. And so we don't want to be in that same position of feeling separate from God. We know we can never be separate, but that feeling of separation, that sense of separation is what keeps us against each other. And so I'm inviting you today to, to shore up your forgiveness practice, to shore up your forgiveness practice, to set your intention to start forgiveness right here today, right now. There's somebody that can come to mind like this. There's something that can come to mind like that you're holding. And I'm inviting you, let it go. Let it go. Let it all go. And just open our hearts so that the door of our heart is always open. And the doors all around us will begin to open because of our open hearts. We create that space for other hearts to open also. And this is what I'm inviting us to do today. Forgive and forgive. And then take a deep breath and forgive again. Michael Beckwith says, with highly evolved people race to see who can be the first to forgive. highly evolved people race to see who can be the first to forgive. Are you going to be the first? Doesn't matter what somebody else is doing. You can be the first to forgive. And so that's what I'm inviting you to do. So let's just turn within as we just move into that place of the open heart. Just move into that place of just knowing and sensing and feeling the presence of God right here, right now, right where we are. Just knowing that this presence is the only presence. This presence is the only life. This is the only mind. This is the only breath. This is the only activity. This is the only power, the only presence. And this presence, this only presence is my very life. This only presence is the life of each of us here this day. The life of each of us here this day. It is that from which we can never be separate. I don't care what we do. We can never be separate from that power and that presence of God. And so just knowing this truth and standing in this truth, I speak the word for each of us this day. Just speaking a word of forgiveness, speaking a word of letting go, speaking a word of the open heart. We do those things that keep open the doors of our hearts. We do those things, we engage in those practices that keep open the doors of our hearts as we release and let go of the judgment and the blame and the anger and the shame and the guilt and all that stuff. We let all that go. And we allow our hearts to open. And as the hearts open, wholeness reveals itself. The qualities of God begin to reveal themselves: love and compassion and joy and harmony, and healing happens for each and every one of us. Healing begins to happen in our body temples as every organ, cell, tissue, function of our body begins to respond to that healing presence of God that is not being blocked in any way, to that healing presence of God that is moving in and through. And as each one of us, always healing, always healing. And this is what we get to experience as we keep open the door of our hearts, keep open the door of our hearts to each other, keeping open those doors to each other. And as we do that, the sense of separation ends, the sense of divisiveness ends. I speak this word for open-heartedness for each one of us. I speak the word for healing for each one of us. I speak the word for healing in the body temples of anyone who's been affected by COVID-19. Just knowing that the healing presence of God is right where each person is, that every organ, cell, tissue, function of the body is responding to that radiant healing presence of God. Anyone who has lost a loved one, anyone who is whose life has been impacted in a way of loss, this word is being spoken right now, knowing that the great comforter, that comforting presence of God is right where each person is. That peace and peace of mind, that is God itself, is right where each person is, each family is. I know that all indeed is well as we walk through this time together, knowing that God goes before us in every way, every step of the way, guiding us and directing us, protecting us, keeping us safe. And I speak the word for each of us to be open to receiving the gifts of the Spirit always, always, as we let go of all that doesn't serve and we keep ourselves open to that which is for the highest and the best for us and for all concerned. And so as I open this circle of prayer, I pause momentarily so that you may speak the names of anyone you'd like held in prayer. You may speak their names silently or loud, and you may speak them now. And so for all those whose names were spoken here this day, I know that God is right where each of them is, blessing and keeping them. That healing, radiant presence of God is everywhere present, everywhere present, everywhere present. This prayer goes out to anyone on this planet needing a prayer this day. Know that in the midst of every situation, every circumstance, God is blessing and keeping them. Thank you, Father, Mother God, for this truth that I know. Thank you, Father, Mother God, for the blessings of our lives. Thank you, Father, Mother God, for just being God in our lives this day. I know that all is well, for I know that all is God. And I simply allow it to be. And so it is.